I want to welcome you to the Lowell Lectures Humanities Series. Tonight, the poet Franz Wright will be reading his work. I do want to remind you first, though, of the next event in the series, which will be on Tuesday, October 25th. Thomas Lynch, who is an undertaker turned essayist and poet, will be reading in Gasson 100 at 7:30. His first book was a finalist for the National Book Award, and his new memoir, Booking Passage, is a series of meditations on being Irish and Irish American. So check the website, or there are places to find out information if you want to know more. Tonight, however, we'll be hearing the work of Franz Wright. I met Franz a couple of years ago for coffee in a small Brighton cafe attached to a greenhouse. We sat surrounded by ferns and potted plants and the trickle of water from a fountain and talked about poetry and healing, Buddhism and Catholicism. He was quiet and modest and very kind, and I found myself telling him my own story of healing and recovery. He is a person who immediately inspires that kind of trust. I think it was in part because of his poems, which I had read a lot of, their frankly personal voice, the evidence of real suffering and redemption. In my classes last week and this week, we've been talking about the poems of Franz Wright and of his father, James Wright. We've been talking about fathers and sons, parents and children, the bafflement and distance, the often ferocious love of all the things that are never said between them. When we opened Walking to Martha's Vineyard and saw the first poem, Year One, we began to talk about all the ways that could be interpreted. Is this Franz talking to his father? Adam talking to God? The poet talking to the reader? The speaker talking to his beloved? Maybe all of these, maybe some of these. Proof of your existence, the poem asks. There is nothing but. There's something primitive and recognizable in these lines. This is creation, one of my students said, the first moment of awareness. Another said, this is a calling out to God. And another said, this is about possibility, I think, some kind of transfiguration. They discussed their favorite lines and the mystery of the white space. They liked the person they were hearing. They especially liked the sense of humor, the idea that this speaker has wit, even in the face of huge adversity. These poems, even in their darkest images of suffering, inspire trust. Elizabeth Lund in the Christian Science Monitor says Franz Wright has a gift for suggesting another level of reality, something spiritual and hidden that others can't see. Another critic calls the poems a prayerful vision of the world. Mostly reading Franz Wright, I'm reminded of a bumper sticker slogan that I actually saw this afternoon, Grace Happens. His poems have been called spare, minimalist. There is brevity, certainly, a compactness of emotional experience, but there are also worlds colliding in the white space between lines and stanzas. They are also incredibly generous in their testimony. There is only one heart in my body, have mercy on me, the speaker says, and we feel ourselves being directly addressed. We want to grant him that mercy, may even feel amazed that he would ask it of us, and we give it. Franz Wright is the author of 16 collections of poetry, the most recent of which, Walking to Martha's Vineyard, won the Pulitzer Prize last year. He also has produced volumes of translation of the work of Raina Maria Rilke, Renee Shar, and Erica Pendretti. He's been recipient of the Penn Volker Award for Poetry, as well as grants and fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the Whiting Foundation, and the National Endowment for the Arts. For the past 6 years, he's been active in addiction and recovery activities in the Waltham, Watertown, Newton, and Lexington areas, as well as working with the mentally ill. He is beginning his 6th year at the Center for Grieving Children and Teenagers in Arlington, which he says, and this is a quote from an email, is easily the most interesting thing I have done in my life, or anyway, my favorite. Tonight, he will be reading from a collection that will be issued next spring called God's Silence. It opens with a 200-line poem, which Franz reports should be appearing in the New Yorker soon. Please welcome Franz Wright.
Thank you, Sue, very much. I thought I would read one poem that actually is not in the new book, but in a work in progress. It's called Approaching New York City. Gray wastescape by midday glare, a sort of empty refrigerator light everywhere. Approach to New York through the South Bronx, vast hives of home to the world of death and breath, just like any place else, but different. The White House of God, maybe. Mother-like mountains or statues. On the night Greyhound, once in loose-fitting hospital gown, you approached, and pushing the ivy stand before you down the aisle, stopped at my seat without looking down, startling me awake, and white roses rapidly spreading like cold flames over your eyelids, the endlessly uttered white petals. Approaching New York City signifies primarily approaching you, always has. Your face, like the sky, it is everywhere, at every turn, though you're a prisoner of not today and taken far from me, but I am on my way. One way or another I will come knocking as so many times before. I won't be long. Oh, I will once again belong. I know it. Publication date. One of the few pleasures of writing is the thought of one's book in the hands of a kind-hearted, intelligent person somewhere. I can't remember what the others are right now. I just noticed that it is my own private, national, I hate myself and want to die day, which means the next day I will love my life and want to live forever. The forecast calls for a cold night in Boston all morning and all afternoon. They say tomorrow will be just like today, only different. I'm in the cemetery now, at the edge of town. How did I get here? A sparrow limps past on its little bone crutch, saying, I am Federico Garcia Lorca, risen from the dead. Literature will lose, sunlight will win. Don't worry. Lesson. Because what is outer is inner, there is no outer. There is no inner. I am trying to get this straight. And what the long sentence assembled by cemetery sparrows said before my presence arrived, dispersing them in its brief wake, oh, wordless, endless. Now this one's a bit longer. It's called East Boston, 1996. And it's in two parts, and then it has sort of subtitles on, but I'm not going to read them. I'm just going to read it all together. Snowy light fills the room, pronouncing itself softly. The telephone ringing in the deserted city. It's one thing when you're 21, and I was way past 21, with unshaven face half concealed in the collar of some deceased porcine philanthropist's black cashmere rag of a coat. I knew that I looked like a suicide returning an overdue book to the library. Almost everyone else did as well, but I found no particular solace in this. At best, the fact awakened some diverting speculations on the comparative benefits of waiting in front of a ditch to be shot alone or in company of others, and then whether one would prefer these last hypothetical others to be friends, family, enemies, total or relative strangers, Would you hold hands? Or would you rather, like a good Homo sapiens monster, employ them to cover your genitals? What percentage would lose bowel control? And given time restrictions, and assuming some still had the ability to move, would ostracism result? Anyway, I knew the rules on this bus. No eye contact. The eyes of the terrified. Look like you know where you're going. Possess ample change to get there. And don't move your lips when you talk to yourself. The destroyed and sick, the poor, the hungry, and the disturbed, estrange. The badly dressed estrange even, and that is uncalled for. The degree of one's power to estrange will increase in direct proportion to the depth of need for others. Do not cry. This can only bring about, on the one hand, an instant condition of banishment from the sole available companionship, or on the other, a near-fatal beating, one more disappointment. Just follow the simple instruction. If you ever come here, it's easy to remember. Any idiot can do it. Don't cry. The world has abandoned us. The all-night convenience store is empty, and no one is behind the counter. You open and shut the glass door a few times, causing a bell to go off, but no one appears. You only came to buy a pack of cigarettes, maybe a copy of yesterday's newspaper. Finally, you take one and leave 35 cents in its place. It is freezing, but it is a good thing to step outside again. You can feel less alone in the night, with lights on here and there between the dark buildings and trees, your own among them somewhere. There must be thousands of people in this city who are dying to welcome you into their small bolted rooms, to sit you down and tell you what has happened to their lives, and the night smells like snow. Walking home for a moment, you almost believe you could start again, and an intense love rushes to your heart, and hope. It's unendurable, unendurable. In a clearing in the corn stalks in late November snow, it was suggested that I fire on that muttering family of crows. I complied and watched as those big ruffled shadows rose from the ground, scattered and vanished in the direction of barren border trees, commencing to speak all at once in hysterical tongues, all except for one, deceased. I turned it over with my boot. The eyes stared at the sky, the minute snowflakes falling into them. Its beak was partly open. It was then I vomited a little. This achievement was the last thing I'd expected when they dug up the old .22 for my afternoon's amusement and banishment. I was just 8, but I swore then and there my career as death was finished. The ground was hard, but I considered going back to the house for a shovel. It did not seem wholly implausible that I might turn around to find my victim limping after me, and I ended up walking away from the house for an hour or so. Later on, I cried and told my mother. She comforted me, as I knew perfectly well she would. In her opinion, I was not to blame. It was that gun, and besides, she was certain crows had their own heaven. I was off the hook. My crow was much better off now. That's what she thought. You could call someone where it's still early. Go out and look at the stars shining in the past. Or open the Joachim Jeremias to the densely printed page, its corner folded, for some reason not yet remembered, before you set the clock. You have to set the clock for a moment that doesn't exist yet, or one that is already past, interestingly symbolized by the identical numeral. The friendly medications are beginning to kick in, the frightening objects emitting the faint nimbus of their reality, slowly returning to normal, if this had been an actual emergency. The long silences need to be loved. perhaps more than the words which arrive to describe them in time. The day is coming when I will no longer consider my mere presence inexpiable. I will place my hand in that flame and feel nothing. I will ask nobody's forgiveness again, or I will just go among people no more. I may writhe with remorse in the night, but the operation must be undertaken by me, anesthesiologist. No one must be asked to relinquish a grievance that can't be removed without further destruction. It may be it is lodged in who he is now, like a bullet in a brain, whose removal might only cause worse change. The forgiveness, I know it will be freely offered or it won't, and that is all. And no one may bestow it on himself. If it is to come, it will come of itself like a separate being, a mystery working unseen as a wind causes still leaves or water to move once again and hide me in the shadow of your wings. Let the heart be moved again. Prescience. We speak of heaven who have not yet accomplished even this, the holiness of things precisely as they are and never will. Before death was, I saw the shining wind. To disappear, today's as good a time as any to surrender at last to the vast current. And look, even now there's still time. Time for the glacial, cloud-paced, soundless music to unfold once more. Time, inexhaustible wound for your unwitnessed and destitute coronation. Introduction. How do you do? I am the broken bird hidden in a grass-filled shoebox and gradually nursed to death by some neglected child. I'm the crazy woman whose pet rat rides her left shoulder, drinking her tears. Wait a minute. Allow me to regress. See, there once was a weird little girl whose weirdness was not all her fault, for her shrink research father kept locked in their vault-like basement not one rat, but scores of them, cage stacked on cage of them, tiny red, green, and yellow electrodes affixed to their skulls. I mean, really. I think I myself would turn into a strange little mouse forget girl if brought up in that house. She secretly possessed, you see, to that truly fucked up dad's underworld, her own bright silver key. Okay, and I am her muteness, the blue of her eyes, like the color of light filling up vacant airliners' cabins at dawn, and her night dreams far happier and more real than any psychiatrist's BMW life, which is as it should be. It is the only rest and dark, the only infinitely lonely and cruel gift that psychosis has to offer. I am her to learn to bear the beams of love. What else? Bells through the leaves, I am here to endure the bells tolling underground. Like you, a guest, a ghost here. Everything will be forgotten. And either I am too alone or I am not alone enough to make each moment holy. No one bats 1,000, friend. No one bats 500. And I have heard God's silence like the sun and sought to change. Now, I'm just going to listen to the silence till the silence. Why is the winter light disturbing? And who, if anyone, shares this impression? If somebody enters the room, am I going to stop being afraid? Why am I afraid to go grocery shopping? I suppose there is a pill for that, but why? Surrounded by so vast a cloud of witnesses, why do I feel this alone in the first place? Is heaven a place? And if so, will our poor, hairy, speechless forebears, all millions of years of them, be there to greet us if and when we arrive? The meek shall inherit Auschwitz, too, if they're not careful. Where do such obscenities of thought originate? And are the words we speak being mercilessly recorded, or are we speaking the already written, premeditated words? Why do I want to live forever, and the next day fervently wish that I had died when I was young? Why do I abruptly feel blessed? And if, and it does, this city harbors a single individual suffering unendurably, am I prepared to take his place? Empty me of the bitterness and disappointment of being nothing but myself. Immerse me in the mystery of reality. Fill me with love for the truly afflicted, that hopeless love, if need be, make me one of them again. Awaken me to the reality of this place and from the longed-for or remembered place. And more than this, behind each face, inducto, introduce me into the halting, disturbed, ungrammatical, soundless words of others' thoughts, not the drivel coming out of our mouths. Blot me out, fill me with nothing but consciousness of the holiness, the meaning of these unseeable, all these unvisitable worlds which surround me, others' actual thoughts. Everything I can't perceive, yet no, it is there. The choice. When you look at the sky, when you look at the stars, God is not there. Someone in hell is sitting beside you on the train. Somebody burning unnoticed walks past in the street. Sailors in snow. God can do what is impossible, but God can only do what is impossible. Sad, incurable gift. Scribbled testament. I stand before you here, some hairy primates fall from grace, one of the patients of God, one of the orphans of light. Having read the great books of this world only to completely forget them again. Having learned how to speak this language, only darken it up a bit, will you? To translate my heart for you from the original silence. In the end, I was simply borrowing it from its inventors, the dead and the brilliant unborn. Forgive me. I am listening. I could not get out of bed for 16 years a day. I could not rouse myself to take a bath. How resubmerge this broken body in the waters of electrocution? How return, redescend to find it a book or wash its bruised clothes, the basement stairs to the site of its hanging, a failure even at that. Delivered, I'm still stung by my abandonment of those unmeetable ones who still live there in hell. Tell me, could I be allowed with them a quiet word? And what might that word be? There must be a way. How assure them, remind them, they too come from the light at the beginning of time. Proved faithless, still I wait. Beginning again. If I could stop talking, completely cease talking for 1 year, I might begin to get well, he muttered. Off alone, performing brain surgery on himself in a small, badly lit room with no mirror, a room whose floor, ceilings, and walls are all mirrors. What a mess, oh my God. And still it stands, the question, not how begin again, but rather why? So we sit there together, the mountain and me, Li Bo said, until only the mountain remains. This is a kind of a translation from a short poem by Renee Char. The truth will set you free. You are the lamp and you are the night. This small upstairs window is yours to look out from. This cot is for your exhaustion alone. This single drop of water is going to cure your thirst forever. And these four walls belong to the being your pure light brought into the world, O prisoner, O bride. For Frank Stanford, a wonderful Arkansas poet who died very young back in 1979, and who was a great influence on me and a lot of people that I knew when we were in our 20s. And I was down in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where he lived, and I got to see the house where he lived finally. And he's been a big hero of mine for a long time. The scheming and chattering mind's abrupt sense in the night of its being surrounded by mind, unendingly, starrily dwarfed and encircled by mind, whose voice is silence, utter silence, unequivocally kind. The first bird talking to the last stars. Maybe it was you who woke me today in the dark. I know you're still around here somewhere. I love you, therefore you are here. For the first time in days, I got dressed, and I walked outside this morning, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth. This is for Donald Justice. There are happinesses gone forever, the days of receiving your letter, or amidst blowing leaves on the quiet streets of small Midwestern towns, late at night, typewriter sounds. The knowers. Little bird bones come back as a bird loudly singing again in the dead leaves come back as green leaves. Only we don't return. A word for joy. I am happy among children's eyes. I am very worried and happy among the crazy and the hopeless. They recognize me right away. I'm home. And there is nowhere I would rather be, alive or dead, than in this world. In this skull I hold and ponder unending space, expanding, if I understand correctly, at an accelerating rate. Meanwhile, housing perpetual births and disappearances of its numberless deafening nuclear furnaces unheard. I consider the voices identically soundless in every mind behind each face I pass, and as I've been instructed each morning on rising, I obliterate the print of my body and am glad the wind is blowing. It is written, adore the wind. and I am speechlessly grateful and glad and afraid. I don't mind saying that I am scared to death of God. I am afraid and blind and ignorant and naked, and I'll take it. I have been happy here, among all the suffering eyes. Why they were brought here and exactly what it was they were expected to take a good close look at, I can't grasp it, but I am so very glad. Dawn walks in blue and diamonds, in robes of darkest grain, wind parted. Sleeping, she looked like a river at dawn, silver sliver of moon, wind in poplars, flickering of a candle that grows imperceptibly taller as it burns. Manacled girl, naked, surrounded by flames, gigantic rows of painless fire. Now I have passed through voice and fire. Could I be cleansed of all desire? I don't think so. Icon, cold, gold, telepathic eyes. Sacrament of metaphor, sacrament of matter. Aren't stars almost in your vicinity? It was only the barest beginning, starward bound, only the March branches, only the first gifts of the first awakening, waiting forever to be born. Dawn walked in blue and diamonds. The walk. More malicious and frightening behavior on the part of inanimate objects. I walked outside today and the void was shining. Immortal and infinite word, and I have heard God's silence like the sun. For the last time I stumbled into a church where no one was home, silently screaming, "Help me! I can't live without you. I don't want to live." I came in the midst of the world, and in the flesh I appeared to you. I seem to hear this, originless. And I found you all drunk, and no one did I find among you thirsting. Staggered out again and took a look around, and suddenly noticed the others, each wearing that identical expression. What is wrong with me? What is going to happen to me? And I heard again the faceless voice saying, "How can you expect energy from above when you continue to receive it from below and are content?" I am not content. Nebraska blizzard, 1974. We were about to make Omaha. Halfway through the winter, someone who is dead now handed me a joint. So we should have light if required. Someone else bought a little flashlight in a store just off the highway. It was getting dark, starting to snow. 60,000 years ago, you opened my lips. I stood at the side of a beckoning wheat field and tried to take a leak. I spent a long minute then checking my eyes in the rear view. Eyes cruel with pain. They looked just like his, reflected in a knife. My brother, the death of the body. He, at least, was never scared. From the past. I suffer from insomnia. From loneliness, I sleep. From the past, I suffer, and the imminence of some radiantly obvious thing I need to say, though quite what that might be escapes me at the moment. as it always has and always will. And I can just see it. I'll be driven to the hospital for the last time with my toothbrush and razor at about 2 in the afternoon, the turnpike deserted, the lights of some new isolated office building beckoning celestially on a distant hill. It smells like snow, I will say. I'm saying, I said. But who was I? So clearly it appeared to me that there was something else than what I saw. Who did I imagine I was? That things as they are, reality as God gave it, was not enough for me. I always feel at this point like I've been reading for 3 hours, but it's been a half hour, and I'll read a little longer, and then if anybody would like to hear anything from my last book or anything, or ask a question or whatever, we could talk. But everyone's elegy. Not all mankind will be cast into fire, though quite a number of them were during the decade preceding my birth, and no doubt even more will be shortly. Why? This no one knows. No one deserves this, and all deserve this, almost all. But why those particular ones, unremarkable, those before and soon? Only you know. And only you know which group, the spared or murdered, represent the doomed and which the blessed. The ones in the fire burn clean of themselves, or those still remaining here in this shocking place that more or less randomly vanished them? In any event, blessed are the alone, for they shall be befriended, and blessed the dead, for they shall live, perhaps for the first time, still unborn in this gorgeous hell of the material. They've inherited now all the peace of the universe, endless night, sleep, still nameless majority of the stars. Until the sky gives up its unendurable beauty of Bach heard by someone alone in her room dying, I wish for this sadness to leave, but it will never leave. But I am also glad. I know that at this very moment your poor head is resting on Christ's breast. I know you are comfortably seated at the Buddha's feet, listening forever to his calm voice and waiting on me. Me, still failing here toward you and following in the bodiless footsteps of God, most peripheral and unlikely of followers, keeping an eye on him from a distance and hoping to remain unnoticed, hoping to remain among the unnoticed in love. I am certain you have now contributed your creature's small light to the great peal of light still issuing from the beginning and rapidly traveling toward us from the end. Well, I have like 3 more that aren't too long. The 2. They were standing there above me when I woke. Franz, I heard them say, in unison, though neither's lips moved. And there was no sound, no interruption of the silence. I heard the word in my mind, as if I'd imagined it, or spoken it aloud, myself, but the voice was not mine. The voices, I should say. Then, like sunlight, when a cloud obscures the sun, suddenly they were gone. A successful day, fill in the blank. It has been given back all I was denied and all I then took over, denying myself for more than 30 years. A cheerful, self-confident trust that I am at home in this universe, and pity for the afflicted, because as one of the afflicted, I could pity and identify with no one but myself. I would like to give my life the sad and awful simplicity of an early weekday mass with a handful of most lonely humans in attendance. What have I ever gained by 1, answering the telephone, 2, reading the newspaper, 3, this morning I had supper with the infinite. Dorothy Wordsworth wrote, "A rainy day, I made a shoe." And this is the last one, progress. Nobody has called for some time. I was always the death of the party. In a way that leaves a scar I no longer wish to love. Come a hairbreadth closer to this shining apparition and be consumed in flame. I'm still alone with all the world's beauty and cruelty, and I recall everything. Everything's here. What is time? When is the present? I'm still here alone in the night hours with everyone, and everything that once was infinitely far and unsayable is now unsayable and right here in the room. I think that's all I have. Like I say, if anybody would like me to read a particular poem, I'd be glad to do it. Or if anybody would like to comment or talk or for a second, I'm open to that. If not,
like a general question about the status of poetry these days, in your opinion. Like with some of the things that Robert Casey had to do, that something like the Poem a Day thing when he was poet laureate, and some of the things that Louise Glick did, and also even some of the things that the Poetry Foundation is doing, like in Chicago through Poetry Magazine, trying to make poems like more popular, more a part of everyday life. Do you think it's a viable direction for poetry to go into?
good luck. I mean, it's never going to happen in this country. But there's a great audience for poetry in this country. There always have, but it's, I mean, it's not rock and roll or movies, I mean, it's not a popular art form. And maybe that's partly its strength. There are lots of cultures in which to be a writer or to be a poet is to have great prestige, but I'm not sure that necessarily produces the best poetry. Maybe like there's something Darwinian about it, but if it's so incredibly difficult to survive as a poet in a country like ours, I don't know, maybe that weeds people out, I don't know, but I don't know. Anybody's welcome to try their hand at it, and like I say, I don't suggest it, but it's okay with me. All right. It says numbers too, but I'm not going to read them. Flight. That glass, was it filled with alcohol, water, or light? At 10, I turned you into a religion. The solitary 4-foot priest of you, I kept the little manger candle burning. I kept your black half-inch of scripture in the hiding place. Destroyer of the world, that empty glass. In which city was it, in 4th or 5th grade? Mother read in the newspaper you'd be appearing, and dressed me up in suit and little tie and took me. I wanted to run to you. Who are all these people? I sat alone beaming at you who could not meet my eyes, and after you shyly approached and shook my hand. If I'm walking the streets of a city, covering every square inch of the continent, all its lights out and empty of people, even then you are there. If I'm walking the streets overwhelmed with this love for the living, I will still be a blizzard at sea. Since you left me at 8, I have always been lonely, star far from the person right next to me, but closer to me than my bones, you are there. It's 1963 again, the old Minneapolis airport, so vast to me, and I am running after the long flight alone. I am running into your huge arms. Now, I am 45 now, and I am dreaming we are together again. We are both 45, and I have you all to myself this time, and we are walking. Together, we are walking down a glowing blue tunnel. We're on time for our flight. I can hardly believe it. We are traveling somewhere together alone. God knows where we are going, and who cares? We're together, walking and happily talking and laughing and breathing. Yeah? Okay. That's one that everyone makes fun of me for that poem, but for some reason. Glad somebody likes it. It's just, my father died when he was my age, and I was about 25, and I spent a couple months in Manhattan wandering around, partly homeless, and visiting him in Mount Sinai Hospital in the evening. Fathers, oh, build a special city for everyone who wishes to die, where they might help one another out and never feel ashamed, maybe make a friend, etc. You who created the stars and the sea, come down in spirit, fashion a new heart in me, create me again. Homeless in Manhattan, the winter of your dying, I didn't have a lot of time to think about it, trying to stay alive. To me, it was just the next interesting thing you would do. That is how cold it was, and how often I walked to the edge of the actual river to join you. Enough? Enough. Okay, thank you.